I'm Tom Welch. Thanks for joining me on the second segment of the Gas-Powered Thoughts, where we're at the flying field and we're going to do some adjustments to show you what it really sounds like. I want to go through a few things first. There's a lot of talk of measuring the temperature, and some use an infrared gun like this. Some will use a thermocouple that attaches to the cylinder head. It's very difficult to compare measurements from one type to another. If you read online that it should be at 230 or 200 degrees or 260 degrees, it can vary greatly depending on what type of measurement you're taking. So I suggest not doing that by the forums. You have to experiment and get your own temperatures, and then you can use that reliably. The next part is the tachometer that we've discussed. There's optical tachometers like this. I really don't end up using this all this much. I prefer the GV1, and the GV1 has a max RPM function, and it will tell me or guide me on setting the carburetor, and that's what I tend to use versus the traditional tachometer. I use this just as a double check every so often. Talking about spark plugs quickly, it's very similar to measuring the temperature. Spark plugs can vary greatly. It depends on what fuel you're using, it depends on what oil, and how hard you've flown. So trying to say you're reading the spark plug, while it's a rough indicator, I would never use it as the be-all to end-all to say your plug looks exactly as another person's plug. Like I say, if you've done some running and you want to take a quick double check of it, it's not a bad thing to do, but to keep on screwing in and unscrewing the plug and deciding if you're rich or lean, it's really not going to be precise enough, and you can get into trouble doing that. So what we're going to do now is we'll fire up the helicopters, and we'll see how well the noise comes through on it, but we'll see if we can show you what's going on with the helicopters. Okay, we've got her running. I've purposely set the low speed needle very rich on this. I'm at about 1 3/8 turns on a 990. I checked the carb before making any changes. I was at right around 1 1/8. It's fairly cold today. We're sitting at about 45 degrees. Spring never did arrive. I'm letting the engine warm up, which is something else I wanted to mention. Especially in the colder weather, you don't want to just go crazy. You can hear that it's four-stroking a lot of the time now. It would fly like this, there's no question. The cold weather's helping, but it would not be ideal. You see some smoke coming off of the exhaust, and the four-stroking is pretty consistent. What we'll do is we're going to turn the needle in back to the good setting that it was at, which is at 1 1/8. You can hear the idle pickup. That is very typical when you turn in the low speed screw. You're decreasing the amount of fuel. Decreasing the amount of fuel, leaning it out, causes the engine to run just a little bit faster. See right away, it wants to take off right away quite a bit better. You can hear that the four-stroking is decreased on it, and we have a little less smoke coming out of the pipe, and now the smoke's almost completely cleared up coming out of the pipe. Now we're going to be brave, and I'm only going to go about a 1/16 of a turn in on this because it'll be starting to get towards lean. You heard the idle pick up once again.
letting you listen to it now. Very subtle difference between being just right and being a little lean on the low speed screw. If the helicopter will not start, that is absolutely a sign of it being too lean. And if it won't want to idle, you got to go richer. And like I've said before, it's always better to go richer than leaner. We've had to do a little bit of video editing. Join me as you hear the high-speed needle out a quarter of a turn. We set the high-speed needle a quarter turn richer than it was, and let's see what it does. Already been warmed up. See how that also affects the low end? It's much more sluggish on spooling up. I'm at half stick right now, and it's struggling to get up to head speed. I'm at about a little over half. Thank God this helicopter flies good at low head speeds. So this is with the needle only set a quarter turn rich. We'll put her on the ground and lean it out. Okay, well, we've shown you what a rich needle looks like. This should still be semi-rich, but you should start spooling up for us now. Hear a little bit of crackle, that's the 4-stroke in. Hit the governor to kick it in. Still not getting the head speed, still rich. There she goes. So that's also a sign of being rich. If it has trouble spooling up, and you start it on the rich side, it can be your high-speed needle just set too rich that it won't even let the governor start. Let the engine warm up for a minute, and we'll do a full collective climb out. You heard it kind of bog at the top a little bit. It didn't pull out quite as strong as it did when it was set correctly. This is with a carburetor pretty close to optimally being set. You could hear that once I fed in full collective, it was running real nice and clean. We're going to do that again. This is pretty close to an optimum setting on this engine. I don't feed in full collective right away. I ease into it. Full collective now. And it just keeps climbing. That's good. She's running good. What you're listening for is unloaded at mid-stick. Right now, occasionally it might 4-stroke a little bit. That's not bad. I'd like to show you one of my favorite checks to really see if you might be just the tiniest bit lean. Seems to work really well. I'm not going to fly as far here as I usually do, but I go way out to my right, into a stall turn, I come down, into a hurricane. And when I do it in bigger air than that, right there in the hurricane, if it's lean, the engine's going to start sagging. If it ever starts sagging there, I absolutely know I'm on the slightest bit lean. I come in and I turn a 1/16 of a turn out on my high-speed screw, and I'll know I'll be right on. So for me, that's the final test. The collective is the first test, and then the stall turned into a hurricane's the second test. There's another way to test if your low's a little lean too, and that's with tick-tocks. When we're in a tick-tock and it doesn't sag much, that's also a sign that your low speed screw is set correctly. So a couple in-air checks that you can check for your low speed screw and your high speed screw.
Thanks for joining me on this segment of Gas Powered Thoughts for the carburetor tuning segments. I'd like to end by saying thank you to Carrie Shirley, and here's my friend Phil flying us out.